Hello, my friends. I hope you're finding yourselves well. We've made it back from what we like to call our home away from home. I'm always so sad leaving, but it feels really good returning home. If you are brand new here, my name is Jessie. I'd like to welcome you to our homestead in the middle of the Ozark Mountains. If you are returning, I am, as always, so grateful for you. All that said, we've got some exciting goings on this episode. I'm forever inspired by the changing seasons, and with the warm weather on the horizon, today we are going to be making our home summer ready. And because I've had so many of you ask in the comment section, we are going to be talking about plant basics, how-tos, and propagation. But before we begin all that fun stuff, y'all, we got some chores to do. So grab your working boots, put them on, and let's go. When the days grow longer, the list of chicken chores follows. Like clockwork, the hens up their egg production and soon many will become broody. And of course, the much anticipated wait for chicks begins. So today we're going to be focusing on this upstairs foyer area. When I drew out the plans for this house, this was the first thing that I had drawn. The irony in that is that it's the last thing that I have decorated. Unless I'm setting out to really design a particular space, normally my design projects are preceded by something I stumble upon rather the other way around. It was no different for this project. It all started when I stumbled upon this antique console. When I found it, I knew exactly where it would go, thus the birth of this upstairs foyer refresh. If you've watched our channel for any amount of time, you know our home is constantly evolving. Most of the time, the evolution is dependent on what season we're currently in. With summer just on the horizon, I've been feeling particularly inspired. Like I've said time and time again, design is just as much about the way it makes you feel as it is about its appearance. That in mind, I really wanted to consider my favorite parts of summer and the emotions that it brings about. For this particular refresh, I was really inspired by the feeling of the closing of a long summer's day. One of our favorite pastimes as a family is loading up our canoes and heading to the lake. We've got a spot that we paddle out to that we like to call our island. We bring our hammocks, enough food and snacks to keep our bellies satisfied, a few fishing poles and some towels, and we are good to go. I love the soft muted tones of the sandy banks, the creamy whites and warm browns, and the cool grays of the stepping stones. The coming home is just as satisfying as the going. I love to throw your towel on the handrail and take a nap while the cool breeze blows through the windows, and the quiet hush that rests throughout the house from all the happily tired people inside of it. It is that mood and those feelings I'm hoping to encapsulate via these simple additions within the next few days inside our home. All rambling aside, let's get this show on the road. So I wasn't at all mad at the plant display that was previously on the wall. It was just starting to feel a little one note, for lack of a better way of putting it. On top of that, plants that were once lush and full also fell victim to my very hard first trimester of pregnancy. Don't worry at all though, these pots will not go to waste as they will soon be placed on the outside of our barn for a future hanging herb garden. This peaceful process was about to come to a screeching halt as the mailman was just around the corner. If you happen to be new to our channel and you're not quite sure who the culprits were, look no further. Once Cyrus June was soothed back to sleep, we were, once again, off to the races. And those pesky holes in the wall, well, they were no match for our expired filler. After taking one last gulp of my cold coffee, it was already time for touch-up painting. Once that was complete, a similar process was applied downstairs, but we'll get to that later. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow. It is the next day, and I've got to admit it was quite satisfying walking up the stairs to see all the work we did yesterday and that wall that is fresh as a daisy. I mentioned that console at the beginning, which ultimately inspired me to do this project, but I also have this new stool that I really like. It is from Wayfair. I can put a link in the description box if y'all would like. It is not an antique, but I think they did a pretty good job at mimicking it. With all the medium brown hues, I thought that a grounding color was much needed. Adding any type of darker pop will do this. To add another touch of black, I brought with me from downstairs one of my favorite pieces of artwork. It is a vintage sketch. I'm a big fan of abstract artwork. Of course, the fact that it is an antique is icing on the top. The fact that it's black and white makes it very transitional. This means it can work in almost any space. Just by simply moving your pieces around to other places, it can really make them look brand new, and normally I end up appreciate them all the more all over again. This little area that we call the foyer inside the foyer hasn't been touched in quite some time, despite the fact that I walk past it at least 3.2 million times a day. This area has definitely seen better days, and it's time we give it the attention it deserves. In keeping with those laid-back, beachy vibes, warm rusts and deep blacks are being replaced with lighter hues. On a textural note, where thicker wool once set now is light linens. Abe's glaring gaze will return at some point in the future. If only for a brief moment, we are going to lay those dark, moody vibes to rest. Replacing Mr. Mysterious is none other than an abstract painting of a lakeside cabin lit in the sunset. If you've been following along, you've seen this DIY project in a past video. Okay, before we take an intermission to talk about plants, let's prep the main floor for your area real quick. So don't get me wrong, I really like this flag and especially what it says, but I think it's ultimately just taking away from the focal point of the stairway, which is all the plants. While I really enjoyed how I decorated this foyer entry table, it's been in the same condition for far too long as far as I'm concerned. That being the case, we're gonna go ahead and take care of it as well while we're at it. All right, now let's talk one of my favorite subjects, plants. A few videos ago, which I will link in my description box, I talked about the easier types of plants based on how available they are, when to water them, and where to put them in your home. If you're interested in that foundational information, I would encourage you to go ahead and check out that video. All right, so let's say you've got the foundation laid out. You've went to your local garden store and picked out your favorite plant you found there. Now, what do you do next? A better question for this next point's sake is rather, what do you not do next? So I'm sure before you got your pretty plant, you got a pretty pot. The very first thing you want to do when you bring your pretty plant home is put your pretty plant in the pretty pot. First of all, I'd highly advise not repotting your plant at all until it becomes root bound, which honestly can take years. If you did happen to purchase a new container for your plant, I would highly recommend simply placing the nursery pot inside of the new container instead of actually repotting it. This approach allows you to ensure that your plant is not sitting in water. The plant is much more likely to meet its demise due to overwatering rather than under. It also makes the roots much more accessible, so if something happens to go wrong with your plant, you can easily slide it out and look at the roots. Also, when it is actually time for your plant to be repotted, it makes it so much easier. All of that stated, if you cannot resist the urge to pot your plant inside your decorative container, I'd highly advise that you at least wait a week to allow your plant to acclimate in its new environment. This makes sure that you avoid the risk of shock and your plant ultimately dying as a result. Secondly, and this may sound super strange, but I'd like to think that plants have a way of speaking to us through their leaves. Most of my plants I can tell are in need of a watering without even touching their soil. Drooping or curled leaves are a telltale sign that your plant is in desperate need of a drink. When it is time to water your plants, make sure that the soil is thoroughly soaked through. Another advantage of keeping your plants in their nursery pot is being able to watch the water run through and know that your plant has fully been watered. All right, now let's talk plant propagation. For those of you who don't know what propagation is, it's basically creating a new plant out of an existing source that you already have. There are various ways of doing it. Different plants are propagated in different ways. In the name of keeping things simple, we are going to be propagating by means of cuttings. So you may be wondering, why in the world would you propagate? So sometimes plants get super leggy and they are in need of a fresh start. You may simply just be wanting another plant. Most of the time I'm propagating when my plants grow way too long and they're starting to graze the ground. I obviously have enough plants as it is, so I really love gifting little plants that were created from ours in our home. There's just something special about gifting someone something that you hold so dearly and having it grow out of your care and hoping that they will fall in love with it just as much as you have. Okay, so you're wanting to begin propagating. You've got your plant, you've snipped however long you're wanting to take from it. Now is the time for just a wee bit of precision. In order for your cutting to grow into a new plant, it's going to have a node. Simply put, the node is basically where the leaf attaches to the stem. For the next step, you're basically going to need to cut between each node. I like to leave give or take an inch of the inner node on each side of the node. In case you didn't know, the inner node is just the spaces in between the nodes. My poor philodendron dark lord fell victim to the ails of my previous morning sickness, dropping its bottom leaves as a result, so I've been meaning to propagate it for a really long time. You can leave, say, around 3 leaves between internodes if you're wanting your plant to be longer when you start it, but I prefer to wait on the length and have an initial fuller plant when it begins. So you can see I'm leaving about an inch, give or take, on each side of the nodes and giving it a good snip. Each one will form its own root system, rendering you a brand new plant. Okay, from this point, you've got 2 options. You can either propagate them in water or soil. I've done both, and I normally get a faster result as far as the roots starting to sprout in water. Plus, it's really fun to be able to see the roots actually grow. But if you do choose to go the soil route, you're going to simply bury the node and make sure your soil is constantly moist on top of giving your plant lots of light. As long as the area isn't too cold, I really love windowsills for this portion of the process. Fear not if your leaves begin to look like they're wilting, as it does take a little time for the roots to sprout and the plant to be able to absorb water. For the water route, you are simply going to fill a vessel with water and place the node beneath the surface, making sure none of the leaves are inside the water as rot can occur. Once again, windows that are outside of direct sunlight are the perfect place for your soon-to-be little plants. Change out your water every few days to prevent bacteria from growing. Once your roots have grown a couple inches, it's time to plant them. If you let them grow too long, you are running the risk that they will go into shock once planted in the soil. To help them get acclimated to their new environment, make sure that you keep the soil constantly moist. Once they have really taken root and got used to their new home, let them dry out completely and then water them as usual. Here are a couple of plants propagated last spring from the same plant. One went directly in the soil and the other in water. Little rabbit trail and behind the scenes info on our family. Our middle 2 kiddos have their own egg and delivery business. It all began after they saw their big brother earning his own money selling his homemade soaps. Lola noticed that our chickens were producing more eggs than our family could consume, and the rest is history. Now that the morning chores are done, let's start this new day. So I was super excited. I had dropped off my paper at my local print shop and sent over the PDFs, but unfortunately he wasn't able to print them in time. So we're gonna do what we do best and work with what we have. This piece is entirely too small for the wall that it's going on, but have no fear, I've got a little trick. So I like to get the biggest bang for my buck, so I'm going to take the artwork that we have and a mat that actually fits it and put it inside the larger frame. The larger the art piece is, the more that it costs. If you got a smaller art piece but you want a more substantial look, or the piece is just simply too small for the space, a larger frame can be used, and you can easily layer the mats inside of one another. Mats can be purchased based on their sizes on Amazon, or if you've got a frame that you aren't using, you can take one out from that. All said and done, you've got a larger piece of artwork for a fraction of the cost. pottery are a call to beachy Mediterranean vibes. They also add a sand-like textural element. Subdued greens and cool grays brought in via the books also help create that laid-back, summery feel. Of course, you can never go wrong with a candle or two, and the plants, as always, are icing on the top of the cake. To add an extra textural element inspired by a towel you'd bring to the beach, I'm adding this woven Turkish blanket. I can never pass up a good vintage or antique stool when I find one. They're so versatile and can be used absolutely anywhere. Put a plant on top and they can become a plant stand. Put them on the side of a sofa and there you've got a side table. The possibilities are endless. But when I found this one, I knew exactly where I'd put it. Y'all, we have come full circle and we are serendipitously finishing off where it all began. Keeping it simple and easy, this tabletop will have a similar profile as the one below. A couple of earthenware pieces, a stack of books, a candle, and a few other odds and ends, and you've got yourself a laid-back, beachy console table, ready to take on even the hottest of summer days. So whenever spring decides it's time to fade to summer, our home and the people that dwell within it will be ready for its arrival. I'm so grateful to have y'all join us in this little refresh, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Without further ado, let's have the final look. Thank you once again for hanging out. All of your support and your kind comments are always so appreciated. If you've got any questions for me concerning the design or maybe any of my plant content, if you want to see more of it or have something else in mind that you would love to see in future videos, just leave me a comment below. If you like this video, I would absolutely love it if you would hit that like button and subscribe and hit the notification to not miss out on any of our other future content. I'd love to hear your voice. Let me know maybe what you would have changed or what you liked most. Maybe there's things that I've done in the past that you'd like for me to bring back. Would you prefer to see more DIYs or complete room makeovers? Anything that may be on your mind, I'd love to hear it. I'm gonna hop off of here because I've got some more DIYing to do, but I will no doubt see you soon. Until next time, friends.